The announcement came at 6:47 p.m. The concert was supposed to start at 8. Taylor Swift's team posted the notice simultaneously across every platform, a single paragraph, carefully worded, apologetic and specific. Severe vocal inflammation, doctor's orders, no safe way to perform, every ticket would be honored at a future date. She was devastated. Within 4 minutes, the post had been shared 500,000 times. Within 8, the hashtag was trending in 17 countries. By the time the crowds outside MetLife Stadium in New Jersey began to understand what was happening and started the long, quiet dispersal toward parking lots and buses and the particular grief of an anticipated thing that will not happen tonight. By then, Kelce was already asking questions. If you've ever driven hours towards something and had it disappear an hour before it started, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, we find the people who showed up anyway and what happened when someone noticed. He had been in the stadium's backstage area, arrived early, waiting for the show to begin the way he always waited, low-key, unhurried, with the easy patience of a man comfortable in large, loud buildings. He had seen Taylor before the announcement, briefly, in the corridor outside her dressing room. She had a towel around her shoulders and was communicating primarily through expression rather than words, the specific economy of someone who has been told by a doctor to rest their voice, and is finding this instruction extremely difficult to comply with emotionally, if not physically. He had held her hand for a moment. He hadn't said anything. She had looked at him with an expression he understood, the specific frustration of someone who takes their commitments seriously and is being prevented from honoring one by something outside her control. "I know," he had said, "just that." She had nodded once, and then her team had moved around her, and the logistics of the cancellation had begun. Travis had walked out to the stadium concourse as the announcement was going out, watching the faces of the fans receiving it on their phones in real time, the sequence of expression from confusion to understanding to the particular quiet grief of a very large disappointment. He stood in the corridor and watched this for several minutes. Then he found one of Taylor's venue coordinators and asked a question that the coordinator had not expected. "Who came the furthest tonight?" The Garcia family had left El Paso, Texas, at 4 a.m. on Thursday. Elena Garcia, 41 years old, had been planning this trip for 9 months, since the February morning when she had sat at her kitchen table at 5 a.m. and successfully purchased 3 tickets to the MetLife Stadium show, 2 nights of furious, refreshing, and failed attempts preceding this one successful attempt, the confirmation email arriving and Elena reading it 3 times before she let herself believe it was real. She had bought 3 tickets, one for herself, one for her husband, Roberto, who had agreed to come not because Taylor Swift was his particular passion, but because Elena was his person, and this was important to her, and therefore it was important to him, which was the math of their marriage. And one for their daughter, Sophia, who was 12 years old and who had been a Taylor Swift fan since she was 8 and who had, when Elena showed her the confirmation email, made a sound that Elena would describe to anyone who asked as the noise a human being makes when something impossible becomes possible. The trip from El Paso to New Jersey was not a simple trip. It was 2,100 miles. It required 2 days of driving, or flight that the Garcia family's budget did not accommodate, or creative combination of Thursday night driving and a Friday layover in a budget motel outside Philadelphia that Elena had booked 6 weeks in advance with a discount code she had found on a forum specifically dedicated to affordable Taylor Swift concert travel, which was a thing that existed and that Elena had found 3 months into her planning process. They had driven, Elena and Roberto in the front, Sophia in the back with her friendship bracelets, 47 of them, made over several months, to trade at the show, and the playlist Elena had built for the trip, every Taylor Swift album in chronological order, which Sophia had suggested and Roberto had agreed to with the easy accommodation of a man who understood that 2 days of Taylor Swift music was a small price for the expression on his daughter's face. They had arrived in New Jersey on Friday afternoon, checked into the motel, driven to the stadium area to orient themselves, eaten dinner at a diner where Sophia had spotted another fan by the friendship bracelets and traded two of hers, and gone to bed early because the show was at 8 and they wanted to arrive by 5 to experience the full atmosphere. Saturday had been perfect. They had arrived at 4:30, found their place in the line, traded bracelets, talked to strangers who became temporary friends the way strangers do in the specific community of a shared enthusiasm, eaten overpriced stadium food without complaint, and taken their seats floor section, row 22, the best seats Alina had been able to get on the available budget, with the specific, earned satisfaction of people who have traveled a significant distance and arrived. At 6:47, Sophia's phone had lit up with the notification. She had read it, she had not said anything for a moment, then she had shown it to Alina. Alina had read it, then Alina had shown it to Roberto, who read it and put his arm around his wife. "It's okay," Roberto had said. "I know," Alina said, "it's okay." And then, because Alina Garcia was a woman who could hold two true things simultaneously, it's also really hard. Sophia had not cried. She was 12, and 12 is old enough to understand that being brave about disappointment is a form of maturity, and Sophia was 12 going on something older. She sat in row 22 of MetLife Stadium with her 45 remaining friendship bracelets on her wrists. She had traded two, which felt right, and she looked at the stage, which was dark and dressed and waiting, and she was quiet. "Can we stay for a minute?" she asked. "As long as you want," Roberto said. They stayed for 11 minutes after most of the crowd had gone. Sophia looked at the stage. She did not say what she was thinking, which was a private thing she kept. Then she stood up and said she was ready to go, and the three of them made their way up the aisle. They were in the concourse, almost at the exit, when a member of the venue staff appeared beside them. The venue coordinator, who had been tasked with finding the family who had traveled the furthest, had access to the ticketing database, which captured billing addresses at the point of purchase. He had run a quick distance calculation. The result was not especially surprising. Large stadium shows draw from enormous geographic ranges, but the specific number was El Paso, Texas, 2,147 miles. He had found their section from the ticketing data and sent a staff member to look for a family matching the description. The staff member had found them in the aisle, almost at the concourse level, a woman in her early 40s and a man about the same age, and a 12-year-old girl with a remarkable number of friendship bracelets. "Excuse me," the staff member had said, "are you the Garcia family?" They had been brought backstage through a route that Sophia would spend the next several weeks trying to remember precisely, because she felt the details were important and she wanted to be accurate when she told people. The corridors, the specific color of the floor, the equipment cases stacked against walls, the way the backstage smelled, different from the stadium, more human somehow, less like a public space and more like a working one. They had been brought to a small room with a couch and a table and bottles of water and told to wait, and they had waited, and then the door had opened and Travis Kelce had walked in. Sophia knew who Travis Kelce was. She was 12 and a Taylor Swift fan, which in the current cultural moment meant she was also reasonably well informed about the NFL, or at least about one tight end in particular. She looked at him, and then at her mother, and then at him again. "Hi," Travis said. He had a way of entering a room that reduced its size, not aggressively, but simply through the physics of being very large and very warm. He sat down on a chair across from the couch and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, which was how he sat when he was paying attention. "I heard you came from El Paso." "We drove," Sophia said. "Both ways?" Travis asked. "Both ways," Roberto confirmed. Travis nodded slowly. "That's a long way to drive." "We know," Alina said, and there was something in how she said it, dry and fond, and not at all self-pitying, that made Travis smile. "Taylor asked me to find you," he said. She can't really talk, which is killing her, but she wanted someone to find the family who came the furthest, and that's you." Sophia looked at her friendship bracelets. "Is she okay?" Sophia asked. Travis looked at her. The question had been about Taylor, not about the concert, not about the refund, not about any of the logistical things 12-year-olds sometimes ask. Just, is she okay? She's going to be fine, he said. She's upset about tonight, but she'll be fine. She wanted me to tell you specifically that she's sorry, that she knows some of you came a long way. Will you tell her it's okay? Sophia said. Because it is. She didn't choose this. Travis looked at her for a moment. Yeah, he said, I'll tell her. What happened next was something that Travis would later describe in the single interview he gave about that evening as not planned at all, which is maybe why it worked. He had intended to spend 20 minutes with the Garcia family, make sure they felt seen and cared for, arrange for their tickets to be honored at the rescheduled show with upgraded seats, and send them on their way with the knowledge that their 2,000-mile trip had been acknowledged. What he had not intended was for Sophia to ask him if he had ever been to El Paso. He hadn't. It's really beautiful, Sophia said. The mountains are right there. You can see them from our school. Travis asked, what school? Sophia told him. She told him about her teacher, Mr. Reyes, who was the one who had first told her that having interests that you pursue seriously was more important than having interests that were popular. She told him that she had started a Taylor Swift lyric analysis notebook in 4th grade, which was not a class assignment, but which Mr. Reyes had read voluntarily and said was the best literary analysis he'd seen from a student in 3 years. She told him about the friendship bracelets, which she had started making in October and which had taken approximately 200 hours total, a calculation she had done and which her father confirmed. Travis listened to all of it. Then he did the thing that had not been planned. Can we go see Taylor for a minute? He said. Just briefly, she can't talk, but I think she should meet you. The corridor outside Taylor's dressing room was quiet. Her team, who had been managing the logistics of the cancellation announcement and the rescheduling communications and the medical protocols, looked up when Travis appeared with a family of 3. He knocked, he opened the door. Taylor Swift was sitting in a chair with a heating pad around her neck and a tablet in her hands, reading something. She looked up. The expression on her face, the specific sequence of surprise, and then understanding, and then something warmer, crossed it in about 2 seconds. Travis said quietly, "This is the Garcia family from El Paso. They drove 2,100 miles." Taylor looked at Sophia. Sophia looked at Taylor. They were across a small dressing room from each other, Taylor in a chair with a heating pad and Sophia with 45 friendship bracelets on both wrists, and the distance between them was about 8 feet and also, in the way that distances sometimes are, much less than that. Taylor held out her hand, not to shake, palm up, the gesture of someone who wants to see what's there. Sophia understood it immediately and crossed the room and placed her wrist over Taylor's palm, and Taylor looked at the friendship bracelets, all of them, going up Sophia's wrist and partway up her forearm. Taylor looked at Sophia with an expression that asked a question without asking it. 200 hours, Sophia said, approximately. Taylor closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then she opened them and smiled, which she could do without speaking. She reached up to her own wrist, a simple chain bracelet, and unclasped it, which took a moment because the clasp was small, and she held it out to Sophia. Sophia took it. She looked at it for a moment, then she looked at Taylor. "Get well soon," Sophia said. "We'll be at the rescheduled show, front row if possible." Taylor laughed, which came out soundless but entirely real, and nodded. The Garcia family drove back to El Paso the following day, Sunday, the return trip mirroring the arrival trip in its structure, early start, motel, the second day of driving, home by evening. The playlist on the return was the same as on the way out, because Sophia wanted it that way. Roberto drove. Elena sat in the passenger seat. Sophia sat in the back with her 45 friendship bracelets and the silver chain on her wrist that she had not removed since the previous evening and did not plan to remove for some time. Somewhere in Ohio. Elena asked Sophia what she was thinking. Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking that we went to a concert that got cancelled," she said, "and had a better night than if it hadn't been cancelled. Elena thought about this. That's a sophisticated observation, she said. Mr. Reyes says I have sophisticated observations, Sophia said. He says I should write them down. Maybe write this one down, Roberto said. Sophia took out her notebook, the Taylor Swift lyric analysis notebook, which had several pages still empty, and she wrote, "Sometimes the thing that doesn't happen is the thing that makes space for what does. The concert got cancelled. The night wasn't." The rescheduled MetLife show happened 6 weeks later. The Garcia family drove from El Paso again because that was the thing they had decided to do without much discussion. It simply was what was happening, the way some things simply are. Taylor's team had arranged upgraded seats, as promised. Floor section, row 4. Before the show, a staff member came to find them and brought them backstage for 15 minutes. Taylor could speak again, fully, clearly, with the relief of someone whose instrument has been returned to them after a temporary and unwanted absence. She remembered Sophia. She asked about the lyric analysis notebook. Sophia had brought it. Taylor read 6 pages of it, standing in a backstage corridor before a show at MetLife Stadium, her full costume on, while 67,000 people waited outside. She turned the pages carefully. She made a sound twice, not a word, just a sound, that meant she had encountered something that surprised her. "You should keep going with this," Taylor said when she finished. "I plan to," Sophia said. "When it's done," Taylor said, "send it to my team. I want to read the whole thing." Sophia looked at her. "Okay," she said, as if this was something that could simply be agreed to. As if the distance between El Paso and this corridor was just the distance between El Paso and this corridor, which, it turned out, was a thing you could drive. Travis Kelce spoke about that Saturday evening exactly once, in a podcast appearance the following month. He was asked what he did on his time off during the football off-season, and he gave several answers, and then he mentioned, briefly, that he had spent part of one evening finding the family who had traveled the furthest to a concert that got cancelled and sitting with them for a while. The interviewer asked why. Travis was quiet for a moment. "Because someone should have," he said, "because they drove 2,100 miles and they deserved somebody to notice that. Taylor would have done it herself if she could talk, so I did it." He paused. "Also, the kid was remarkable. She knew more about songwriting than most songwriters I've met." The interviewer laughed. "I'm not joking," Travis said. "Sophia Garcia is 13 now. She is in 7th grade. Mr. Reyes is still her teacher. She has him for English, which was not guaranteed, but which both of them agree is a good arrangement. The lyric analysis notebook has 47 pages now, which Sophia considers a satisfying coincidence given the number of friendship bracelets she brought to MetLife Stadium. She wears the silver chain every day. She has not taken it off. She drove to El Paso's Franklin Mountains with her father on the Sunday after the rescheduled show and sat on a rock and looked at the city spread below her and thought about the things she had written in Ohio, about cancelled things making space. She thought it was still true. She thought most things she wrote were still true later, which was a thing Mr. Reyes had told her was the mark of careful thinking. The notebook is not finished. She is not in any hurry. And there we have it, a story that reminds us that cancellations are not only endings. They are also, sometimes, the removal of one thing that makes space for an entirely different and unrepeatable thing to occur in its place. Taylor Swift lost her voice on a Saturday and could not give 67,000 people the show she had prepared for them. That is a real loss. It mattered. The disappointment in the parking lot, on the buses, in the text messages people sent each other as they left, was real. None of that is minimized by what happened to one family in a backstage corridor. But what happened to one family in a backstage corridor was also real. Travis Kelce asked a question nobody had thought to ask. Who came the furthest? It is such a simple question. It requires almost nothing to ask and a small amount of data to answer. And the answer pointed to 3 people from El Paso who had driven 2,000 miles and were walking toward the exit of an empty stadium with the specific dignity of people who do not make their disappointments other people's problems. He found them, he sat with them. He brought a 12-year-old with a lyric analysis notebook to meet the person she had been studying for 4 years. And that person read 6 pages of the notebook before a show, and that 12-year-old understood, in the way that certain things are understood when they happen to you directly rather than being described. She understood that the thing she was doing had value, that the serious pursuit of what she loved was a real and worthwhile use of her time. And that someone she deeply admired confirmed this with the kind of attention that cannot be faked. Elena Garcia booked 2 rooms in a New Jersey motel months in advance for a concert that got cancelled. She drove 4,000 miles round trip. She sat in row 22 of an empty stadium with her husband's arm around her and said out loud that it was hard, because namming hard things is an act of honesty rather than weakness. Roberto Garcia drove the whole way. He listened to every Taylor Swift album twice. He said, when asked about it, that the music was pretty good actually, and that the mountains in New Jersey were nothing like the mountains at home, but that the diner outside Philadelphia had excellent pie. These are the people who showed up. These are always the people who show up. And sometimes, when a voice gives out, and a show cannot go on, and a stadium empties into the night, someone in the building asks the right question and follows the answer, and ends up in a small room with a family from El Paso, and the evening becomes something else entirely, something smaller and more permanent than any concert. Thank you for joining us for another story. Until next time, if you're ever in a position to ask who came the furthest, ask, and then go find them.